All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. Seeing you over there on the YouTube side, hello. Good to see you. Glow over there, good to see you as well. Psycode over on the Twitch side, good to see you. How have you been? So tonight we're going to pick up, once again, kind of where we left off from before, although I've made several massive sweeping updates in terms of like off-camera performance changes. So we'll get into that in just a second. But before we do that, I do want to just take a quick second to thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our elite partner, Javier Lazaran, followed by our partners, Gerbolis Inc. and Matt Osgard. Those are the highest tiers of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon, followed by the list of supporters you see here on the screen. They're a combination of the other tiers of support over on YouTube memberships, Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So all of that goes directly towards the channel and supports and covers costs, things like software licenses, hosting fees, eventually having some sorts of assets made that I'm not capable of doing myself, things of that nature. So all of that helps out tremendously, and I really appreciate all of those things. So thank you all very much for that. And of course, a big shout out to you guys, the viewers, whether you're joining us live on the YouTube side or the Twitch side, or if you're just catching the VOD after the fact. Without you guys, this project and this channel would be non-existent. So thank you guys very much for being here. All right. Abel over there on the YouTube side, hello. How are you? Okay, so I believe I mentioned in the last stream, because I had just gotten the test bed back up and working, which was kind of the last and final thing at the time that I wanted to do before releasing 0.11, other than testing it on other platforms. And so one of the things that kept me from doing that, though, was the performance. And I think, if I remember correctly, there was, I want to say we were running at like 20 to 40 frames per second, something like that. And so obviously that was just no bueno, right? So I had to take a look into that, and I had some ideas as to what was causing those problems. And I fixed those things. And so as you can see here, I've got the test bed running, and this is actually at 1080p resolution, although it doesn't look like it because it's kind of small on this screen, but this is actually a 4K display. But we're running at over 400 frames a second, right? So I would consider that problem, at least right now, solved. And so, we can back out a little bit here and just kind of look at the scene as a whole. And, things are running really, really smoothly now, which is awesome. So, the other thing that you may have noticed is we now have fog, which is just your basic distance-based fog. I added that in really quickly, and it really kind of helps with environmentals, just to kind of round out how the scene looks. And we'll kind of preview that a little bit. I fixed some visual bugs with the water, so now that the water in the shade actually looks correct for the lights that are interacting with it, and so forth. So just lots of little things like that. But the biggest one is definitely the performance changes. So that is the Kohi test bed. I'm going to bump that out of the way. We're done with that for now. And I just want to go ahead and run really quickly the game itself. And you can see here that I've done the lighting updates are a little bit more clear in this example. And so I fixed a bunch of bugs around that, and I actually placed in a large sort of plane above here just to provide a little bit of shadow so we could kind of see what some of that lighting looks like when it's not bright out in the sun like that. And so if we go to the editor real quick, we can back out and have a look at that. And that was just to sort of test out some of those changes, right? So obviously the fog is pretty exaggerated right now, but I'm doing that just because I wanted the ability to sort of, start testing it and playing around with some of these settings and so forth. So I do want to add, there's a couple more controls I want to add in with that, but we can immediately right now, we can actually change the color of the fog if we wanted to on the fly. So, it's just a matter of kind of going through and fixing all these various little things that I keep finding. You'll notice that the focus on the text boxes is also quite a bit more pronounced, we should say. And that was by design. I just never actually had put it in. On the initial sprite sheet for the UI, this bit right here was what we were using for the text boxes, the text boxes. And then I had this one below it that was actually meant to be used for focus text boxes. That's why it has a white border. And so you take that, by the time you add in a color to that, whatever the color of the control is, you get a nice colored highlight there. So if it's just uncolored or just white as your base color there, it'll be white, or you could have red, green, or blue, or whatever color it is that you decide to add to it. So that just makes it a little bit more obvious as to what's going on, makes it a little bit more obvious as to which controls are focused and which ones aren't, and so forth. Okay, so those are a lot of the main visual things that I've done. Now I want to talk about some of the performance stuff. And we do have some more UI work to do tonight, and actually there's something kind of major with that I want to kick off probably tonight, but we'll see. So, big thing with the performance. If I go to, actually, let me think of one that's actually a good example. If I go to the shadow shaders, right, for the, let's see. Let's use shadow model, right? So this is the shader that we use for models at the moment, whether they be animated or static. And so what we had before was we had this sort of, we had a shader that's looked, well, I can actually still pull it up because it still exists. So we were basically using the skinned vertex shader for both skinned and non-skinned meshes. And the difference is that we essentially had a geometry type that we were passing in, and then if that geometry type was 1, then we would essentially run these calculations. If it's 0, these calculations got ran anyways, but just zeroed out. And the original thought behind that was I know that the cost of changing pipelines can be a little bit expensive. The cost of having branches in your code can be expensive. And so I was trying to go branchless and trying to also, not have to swap pipelines all the time. Not that I was doing it all that often, but anyways, I digress. So essentially the problem is this logic was always being run, which was not optimal, right? And so as it turned out, the weight behind this was a lot more than the weight behind, what you might expect when you're switching pipelines, or even if you had an if in there, that didn't really help because both cases got run anyways because of the way that shaders work. Blah, 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 blah. All right, so how did I get around this? Well, we had, I split it back out into 2 shaders. So we have this is the skinned variant, and then we also have the standard, the non-skinned variant, which obviously doesn't take that stuff into account. And then instead of having to create like a separate Kohi shader, which includes all of the pipelines and stuff that's necessary, but also the descriptors that go along and the descriptor sets that go along with that, I didn't want to have to sort of switch all of that stuff and create the material in 2 separate Kohi shaders and all of that stuff, which due to the design I would have had to do. And so what I really wanted was I wanted the ability to use the same shader, but with two different vertex layouts. And so after thinking about it for quite a bit, I came up with a solution that actually wound up working out really, really well, and we're going to use it going forward. And it's not terribly complicated. It was actually a bigger pain in the butt to set up the parsing and all of the structures for the configuration of it than it was to actually do the thing. But we now, in our shader configuration, ignore this attachments for a second, we'll come back to that. We have this pipelines array, right? And so you'll see that we have two here. We have one for static geometry, and we have one for skinned geometry. And each one of those has their stages right there. And then they also have their attributes. So you'll notice for the static geometry, we only have the static attributes, right? We don't have the weights or the bone indices. But for the skinned, we do. And so the other difference between them is they use different vertex shaders, right? So the static uses this sort of shadow model vert, whereas the skinned geometry uses the shadow model skinned vert. And then they both use the same fragment shader, right? Which technically there doesn't even need to be a fragment shader. That's in there for debug purposes, but I digress. And so what we wind up with is these pipelines literally turn into what becomes Vulkan pipelines under the hood. And so what we do is we essentially create a separate pipeline for each one of these things. So for static, we have a set of pipelines. And I'll say a set of pipelines, and I'll qualify that here in a minute. We essentially have a set of pipelines for static, and then we have a set of pipelines for skinned. And so those pipelines are created with these two shader modules, right? So the vertex and the fragment, right? So those are the stages for that particular pipeline, right? And then these attributes. Same goes for this guy. And so the idea here is that we can have any number of these pipelines, right? So static doesn't always have to be number 1. It can be number 6 if we wanted, if we had some other sort of layout. And so what this is also going to allow is for us to have other types of geometry that maybe don't include all of this information, but maybe we still want to render materials in a similar way somehow. Or, maybe it contains extra data that, we don't necessarily want to use or create a different set of vertex and fragment shaders for, or something like that, right? And so this allows us to essentially configure our pipelines a lot more granularly than we could before, because each pipeline is actually configured according to these objects here. So you can think of each one of these as sort of a pipeline set, I guess you could say. Now, what do I mean by pipeline set? So if we go into the Vulkan backend, we have, let's see, I think this is actually shader create here, which is perfect, because pipeline stuff is down here. So what we had before was when we create pipelines, or when we created a shader, we essentially have these different topology classes. So for these different topology classes, you have to have essentially a separate pipeline. There are extensions to make this dynamic, but they're not widely supported. So this is one of those things where we have to have a separate set of pipelines for these things. Now, what do I mean by topology classes? Just as a refresher here, because we did this a long time ago, is a topology class is basically the type of topology, or the overall, we use the term class of topology that we're talking about, right? So we have points, lines, and triangles. Those are our 3 classes, right? And within that, you can have different topology types. Now, points obviously are just points. There's only one type of topology with points, and it's a point list. With lines, you can have a line list or a line strip. And then with triangles, you can have a triangle list, a triangle strip, or a triangle fan. But those things have to be in separate pipelines because they cannot overlap with one another. So you can change the topology type within that class on the same pipeline, but if you have to change a topology class, you have to be on a separate pipeline. feel free to refer to the Vulkan spec on that. But we had that before, so that's nothing new. So this is what I mean when we say we have a group of pipelines. So now instead of doing this once, we actually do it once per one of those groups, right? So we have that pipeline count is right here. So that's our sort of pipeline as configured in our shader configuration. And then, we essentially do this once for that, right? So we read in all of those attributes that we and the stages that we configured. And now this just builds it based off of that instead of some hard-coded stuff that we had in there before. One other thing, since we are in here, that I added along with that, because we're going to need this for future pipeline enhancements. In fact, I've already made one, is configurable attachments. So in this case, we have just 2 attachments, which is why I'm saying the fragment shader isn't really necessary because it's not being used right now. But anyway, so right now we have the depth buffer and the stencil buffer, right? And we can specify a name for that, which is just for debug purposes rather. And then we can also specify the format of it. And so what this allows us to do is we can also specify this here instead of having it hard-coded in Vulkan like we had before, because there was really no way for us to be able to switch this out without having to change the code. And so another example of this would be if I take a look at the, editor gizmo is probably a good example. So this one has all of the attachments, right? So we have a color attachment, which we can have multiple of, right? That's going to be important in the future. But per Vulkan, you can only have one depth and one stencil, or really a depth stencil attachment at once. But you can specify multiple color attachments here if you wanted to render to multiple targets at once, which we will be doing eventually. But this is just another enhancement that we put in for configurability. This particular change here doesn't have anything really to do with the performance changes. This was just a configurability thing. But yeah, the main performance changes came from actually switching to using multiple pipelines and different pipelines between static geometry and skin geometry. And it gave me an insane boost to frame rate. Absolutely insane by making that switch. So that's the primary change that we made there. And there's some other things that I want to do to the shaders eventually to maybe trim that down a little bit more, but I don't think I'm going to have anywhere near that impact going forward unless I switch to like instance rendering or something like that. Let's see. Okay, so let me catch up on chat because I know that was a lot of stuff. Diamond, good to see you. How's it going? Welcome. Were you branching on a uniform value? Because if you were, performance wouldn't be so bad, as all warps could just run the non-skin version. If you were, the problem could be low occupancy, as in using too many GPU registers. It was kind of a combination of both of those things, because I tried, before I actually broke down and did this, I tried a whole bunch of different things, just to see if I could get that to be remedied in any way, shape, or form. And the only real fix for it was to completely separate out the pipelines. And it just, it just worked so much better. It's one of those things where I was trying to optimize, but it was like the wrong optimization. I was totally barking up the wrong tree, basically. Let's see. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. I'm still catching up on chat here. Frozen Shadow, how's it going? Good to see you. What switch? So I'm assuming by the switch, I basically, the Cliff Notes version of it is we have the ability in our shaders now to supply multiple what we call pipelines. Really, it's just multiple vertex layouts, but it's a little bit more than that. And so for each of these pipelines within the same within the same Kohi shader, we have the ability to specify different stages and vertex attributes. And we may expand on this in the future. But So we can see here that we've got one named static geometry that points to, the shadow model vert and shadow model frag, and then has these attributes, which is just our standard attributes. And then we have this skinned geometry down here, which points to a different vertex shader that takes skinned data, and then has this set of attributes, which is basically the same as above, except it adds bone IDs and weights. And so by making that change, my frame rate essentially went from between 20 and 40 to over 400 in the Sponzo test scene. So yeah, it was pretty big change. Let's see. If you had to rebuild Kohi from the ground up today with everything that you've learned since then, what would you approach differently? Actually, I'm going to talk about one of those things tonight. Because there are a couple things that we tried along the way that didn't work, and there's a few things that did work. And so I'm actually going to get to that in a minute. That's going to be a discussion around our UI system, actually, because that's kind of the last system that works the way that it does. Let's see. So basically parallelizing the draw calls through different pipelines. No, I'm not even doing that. That's the thing. I'm not even doing anything that fancy. It's literally by splitting them out and sending, and using, let's say I've got a list of static geometries and a list of animated geometries or skinned geometries, right? It's literally by using one pipeline, rendering all of the static geometry, and then switching pipelines and then rendering all the animated stuff. Instead of trying to switch that dynamically in the shader and just actually switching to separate pipelines, huge performance increase. Velcro Beans, raiding with a party of 4 viewers. Thank you so much for the raid. What did you get up to on stream? I don't believe I have seen you before. Maybe I haven't. It's been a bit. Let me toss you a quick shout out. Let me double check. Pika, yeah, exactly. I'm going to toss you a follow. Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate that. Remove branching in the shader, yes and no, but also so I tried branching. Branching was one of the things that I tried. And then I also was running all of my either skinned or non-skinned geometry through the same shader. And, just processing those bone animations of basically just throwing rubbish data at it and then zeroing it out and not applying it, right? That didn't work either. The solution was to actually just have different pipelines. So all the fanciness and stuff didn't work. The simple thing worked. Should have known. You haven't been around? Okay, well, welcome. Welcome very much. I was actually just at it, answering things in the chat, but let me give my quick spiel, and I promise I'll keep this short. So what we are working on is, two things, technically. So on this channel, we've built the Kohi game engine, which is a game engine written completely from scratch in C, using Vulkan as its initial rendering backend. I say initial because we have plans to support Metal and Direct 3D in the future. And so everything has been written with that in mind. It is free and open source. It is on GitHub. I'll go into that in just a second. But the idea is that it's supposed to serve as sort of an educational series on a way to build a game engine. It's not the only way to build a game engine. It's not even necessarily always the right way to build a game engine. We try a lot of different stuff on here. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. That's one of the things we're talking about now. But we do deep dives into all these different topics and discuss them and why they worked or didn't work. So the engine itself is free and open source. It's cross-platform. Right now it runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. And so actually I will drop a link in chat there. And I promise I'll catch up on chat in just a second. The engine itself is available on GitHub. It is Apache 2.0 license, which basically means if you use it, just say that you used it. That's it. There will never be any sort of licensing fees or royalties of any kind associated with this engine. it will always be free and open source. It's an educational exercise, so I believe that stuff should be free. So that is the first part of it. Also, if you scroll down on the page, you'll see YouTube, Twitch links. We've got a Discord with about 1,000 people on it. And then a GitHub link and all that good stuff, right? So there's that. But then there's also, we are using that, and sorry for the flashbang, but it is what it is. Thank you, Google Docs. We are building a game called Shadows of Illumina, which is a 3D isometric action RPG. And this is sort of the game document that we've started building out. And I'm just going to scroll through this really, really fast because we've got some lore. We've got a bunch of system designs in here. We've got item designs, combat ideas, a whole bunch of stuff that we've kind of come up with on stream. And then, let me see. Can I get this to... I think I have to reload Incarnate. Yeah. Okay. So the other thing is we've got this sort of world map just to kind of give you guys an idea of how large the world is going to be in this game. It's not finished yet. You can see there's huge unfinished sections here, but we've actually done a lot of exploration into the lore and history of some of these lands on stream. And so this is what we're going to be building out. We're going to get back to that soon, but we're kind of in the throes of some technical stuff now. I did a bunch of performance optimizations, and we're actually building an editor so that we can start building out some of this stuff. And so, yeah, the whole project is basically built from scratch, minus a couple things that we use to import assets, but those are externalized and not part of the core engine. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Let me go ahead and catch up with chats. Okay. Let me move this window a little bit here so I can actually read this. Now that I think about it, it's similar to how on the CPU we prefer work on one type of data at a time for Dcache and iCache efficiency. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, right? Along the same lines. We split those bits of work. Eventually, I am going to multi-thread the renderer so that I can actually dispatch a lot of those things to separate threads. Apotham, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. 12 months. That's the year mark. Thank you so much for all that support. I really greatly appreciate that. That means a great deal to me. How have you been, by the way? We are working on a roaming enemy strategy and combat dummy for our town. Beanie equals artist, I pretend to dev. Okay, well that sounds awesome. I will have to tune into your stream next time I happen to see you online. Sounds like good stuff. What kind of game are you guys making? Really cool. Interesting to see someone making an engine. Seems very daunting. Yeah, I've been at it for 4.5 years, almost 5 years. But that's less than part-time hours per week. So asterisk there. Realistically, it's what you're looking at here is probably about a year's worth of work. Maybe a little bit more. Let's see. So, I think I can run it real quick. So we've got, basic systems in. There's a lot of debug drawing going on the screen right now because we were setting some stuff up. But, I've got this character who can, run around and jump and, attack, things like that. And so we've got a lot of the basic systems set up that we're going to need. And now we are actually switching to creating an editor. And so, we have the ability to, go in here and change various properties. I need to add properties to this. That's part of what we're going to do tonight. So like if I wanted to change the fog color, I could do that. Or I could go in and select a particular entity and, move it around if I wanted to. Or I could, zero out its position if I wanted to, like that. All kinds of good stuff. You can see there's still some issues with the editor. The gizmo isn't perfect yet, but we did write that from scratch too. And tonight what we're actually going to do is we're going to work on the scene tree a little bit, so that we can actually go through and use this to select entities within the scene. So, like I said, everything here is written from scratch, so it's taken some time and debugging, but, you know, that's kind of where we're at. Breakpoints. Cool. Shadows of Illumina, only you working on it? Yes, for now. I do have somebody lined up to do some of the music for it. I am hiring somebody to do that. He's a viewer here on the channel. But yeah, other than that, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be me doing all of it. Especially when it comes to the programming, definitely it's going to all be me. Multiplayer RPG, dungeon crawler, roguelike, town building thinger. That sounds awesome. Okay, I'm definitely going to have to check that out. Yeah, I did toss you a follow. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, next time you're online, I happen to see you, I'll hop in. All right, haven't forgotten you guys over on the YouTube side, so let me catch up over there as well. When you tried to fix the low FPS problem, what tools did you use? Did you use the RAD debugger and RenderDoc? Are there any other tools? RAD debugger does not currently have a stable Linux client, so I can't use that. Which is why I have this up on the screen, because this is what I use as my debugger. The debugger that shall not be named. But I don't code in this. I like to code in NeoVim. But as far as RenderDoc is concerned, I did do a little investigation in RenderDoc. I had a suspicion as to where the problem was. And so I used RenderDoc to basically help me with that. But it wasn't really... There wasn't a whole lot that I could sort of demo where I could say this is definitely the issue. It was kind of, I think in my head this is the issue, and then I did it and it worked. RenderDoc was just to sort of confirm that. Let's see, I want to develop an OpenGL game for Mac, but for some reason RenderDoc is not supported in Mac. Is there an alternative for this? Yeah, Xcode has those tools. So if you're doing it on Mac, you're going to have to use Xcode to debug that. Which is going to be interesting because... I've gotten away with it with Vulkan, although like any graphics debugging I've done on Linux or Windows, when it comes to, you know, having to drill into the shaders and stuff like that. And so I've managed to avoid it for the most part on Mac OS, but when I write the metal backend, obviously I'm not going to be able to avoid that at all. So that's going to be interesting. Why is the debugger so lame on Linux? I mean, it's not lame, right? It's just, you know, it is what it is. He's just not gotten around to it, frankly. Still couldn't find a debugger with a nice GUI on Linux. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the better ones that exists out there for now. And this is pretty consistent across platforms, which is why I use it. I don't really like it, but you know, it's the best one out there. And if I want a better one, I'm gonna have to write it, and I don't have time for that. But maybe one day. So the other thing on Mac, right? The reason RenderDoc isn't supported on Mac is because RenderDoc, really, I mean, it has legacy support for OpenGL, right? But everything on Mac goes through Metal ultimately. And so he hasn't written a Metal backend for RenderDoc. That's a massive undertaking, right? So that's the reason it's not available on Mac. Does Xcode debugger support OpenGL? I would imagine that it does, but I don't know that for sure. But I don't see why not. I don't see how it would have been done otherwise, frankly. Apple has not removed OpenGL. It's still there. However, the newest version of OpenGL is 4.6, and you will only get 4.1 on Mac, and it is deprecated. It's not obsolete. It's not been removed. It's deprecated. They would break a lot of legacy apps if they got rid of that. can technically run it through Wine. I've seen some people. Would that actually work, Diamond? I figured it was too low level to actually work. That's interesting. How many people who use Linux for programming, you'd think debuggers would be the best? A lot of people do use GDB, which I've tried it. I just haven't quite got there yet. Seen a few people use it on stream. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I'll have to try it. I didn't think about emulating it through Wine. All right. Typical Apple move. Yeah, I mean, it sucks that they don't support Vulkan, right? That sucks. But like, if you compare Metal to OpenGL, Metal is hands down better, like in so many ways. All right. All right. Where did I leave off? I think I was pretty much done with this discussion. So that's up to where we are now. Let me look at the changelog and see if there was anything else that I had put in there. Oh, yeah, there was one other thing. I added a depth prepass to the renderer. So that is something that we didn't have before. And essentially what that is we are rendering to the depth buffer before we render to anything else. And we're going to need that for some of our effects that we're going to put into place sometime here shortly in the future. So screen space ambient occlusion is one of those things. Screen space reflection is one of those things. So we're going to be needing that as well as a couple of others. And configurable shader attachments. We're going to need those for some of the render enhancements that we're going to need, or that we're going to be putting in place sometime soon. So that was just a matter of setting up a new shader to only render to depth. And so that was so depth prepass is pretty simple, right? It only has depth and stencil. And then we have only static geometry supported at the moment. I'm not doing animated geometry in this, although I could add it. But we basically only do static opaque geometry in this. We might add others later, but for now, that's all we're doing. And then anything else is done in the typical forward style rendering. And so I'm hoping that this will give us enough of a boost to be able to get some of those other systems in place here shortly. But I just wanted to point that out too. And then configurable fog to scene and pass through to renderer. So that was the last thing that I added in. So if we look at zone 00, we have a few new properties here at the top. We just have fog color, fog near, and fog far. Now we haven't exposed those last two properties to the editor. We should probably get that done tonight as well. But this just allows us to be able to set the fog color per scene, which is going to be hugely helpful. And then we can sort of modify it on the fly. This is just kind of a start fog color, right? We can modify it on the fly if we need to. That's just a matter of setting that in the scene. We'll even be able to tween it and things like that. So, in fact, that might be a fun exercise to do using trigger volumes. They had to compile with some GCC extension or the other. I'm not as familiar. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so they did kind of have to hack it a little bit probably then. I've used GDB. My mind hasn't fully grasped it yet. Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, it took me a while to switch to Vim too, so I get that. Let's see. Can I start OpenGL or Vulkan? If you've never done any graphics programming, start with OpenGL. And then jump to Vulkan once you have a solid understanding of it. Okay. So, UI. Let me run this again. And we'll step through kind of what I want to set up. Oh yeah, I forgot one more update that I made. You'll notice that the text is now centered on the buttons. And that is because I actually modified the buttons a little bit and some of the API having to do with the standard UI to make things a little bit simpler to use and less verbose. And so buttons now have a type. You have a standard button, which has nothing on it. And then you have a text button, which you can apply text to. And then there's also going to be an image button where you can apply an image or a texture to that. And so these are all now text buttons that have just the text centered to them. So we use the measure functions that we already had in our font system to actually pull that off. And so let's see. What we really want to do is we want to expand this tree, make it a little bit, obviously, better looking than it is now. It's not really a tree, it's more of a list at this point. And have the ability to have like a button to its left to expand it down like a drop-down list. Kind of like the file explorer you might see on something like this, right? So where you've got these sort of arrows that can collapse, and then you can view the things under them. That's kind of what we're going for on this. So the first step of this was to sort of get these things to list out. And also, we're not listing any child objects here, I don't think. Let's see, fire. Yeah, so the fire light isn't there. And the sound emitter isn't there. So like this guy, which is the fire emitter, and then this guy, which is the fire light, those aren't there. They should be like listed under this. So they should be like pushed over to the side a little bit and so forth. And then I'm thinking that probably at some point, we're going to need some sort of like overflow handling with like maybe scroll bars or something. So we might kind of start thinking about how that's going to look, but I don't want to jump too far ahead. So what we're going to do is right now we're just kind of creating a label control for each one of these things. And you click on the label and it does the selection that way. What we're actually going to do is we are going to create a custom control or new type of control that's going to create, it's going to contain a few sub controls. It's going to contain I think we need to contain a label, a button, right, for the expanding thing, like this little caret thing there. And then underneath that, a collapsible sort of area to add child objects to. And so I'm thinking we call this like maybe tree item. And then you can add other tree items to that. And it just sort of cascades down and shifts over to the right as you go down in levels. And I think that's probably going to give us what we need. And that should be able to expand and collapse as we go. And then we'll go ahead and add, other things to that as well. Like when you, if you single click on something, it selects that object. But if you double click it, I want it to sort of turn into a text box and allow us to rename it, right? Just right here in the tree. Things like that is kind of what we want to add. So I guess let's go ahead and start scaffolding that. I'm going to just bat this off to the side here for a minute. And let's actually take a look at how the editor looks now. And I'll go over some of those API updates with you guys as well. So let's go all the way to the top. And if you take a look at where we initialize the UI, this is much, much less code than was here before. So you can see here, most of these controls are done in about 3 to 4 lines of code, and half of its configuration, right? So we don't have to register the control anymore like we had to do. We don't have to update the active unless we're deactivating a control anymore. So there's a few reasonable defaults that I put in place to keep us from having to declare the same things over and over and over again. And so essentially we just create the control, and then we add it as a child to something, and then we set its visibility. And so this case, this is the main root control that everything else in the editor is a child of. And so we essentially create that, add it to the UI system with no parent, right? And then set its visibility to false. And then we come down to our main window, which is this guy over here. And so that is just a panel. We go ahead and we add that as a child, and then we set its position, right? And then within that, we have, the save button. So we create the button, we add it as a child, we set its width, we set its position, and then we set non-click event. And so it's just very, it's very condensed from what it was before. And so what we can see here is that we have a new SUI control create, SUI button control create with text. So this is what creates a text button as opposed to just a standard button, right? So we still have the old school create here. So if we wanted to create a button that doesn't have anything in it, or we want to add content to it manually, we can do that. But now we also have the SUI button control create with text. And so that goes ahead and adds there, right? And so I think what we're going to do is we could create the image button, but I think for now I'm just going to create like a text button and use that for a sort of drop-down thingy. And we'll just change the text accordingly. That's going to be the easiest thing to set up because there's a couple things I want to do and get in place before we jump too far into that. Speaking of that, I probably should point out one more thing that this is not something I've done off camera, but this is something I'm probably going to do off camera, is somebody had asked about if there's anything that I would change the way that I've written it from if I were writing it from new. The UI is one of those things, and I've made some of the changes, but there's a fundamental change in here that I'm going to have to make because of the way that the engine now works versus the way it did when I first wrote it. And that is ownership of controls. So right now, controls actually exist by whatever calls the create function, right? So they are owned at that point. However, within the actual, so if I actually go to, I guess, yeah, text button is good enough. If I actually go into this, we have resources that are actually loaded and owned in here, right? So we have a label control, which references a font underneath, and all the assets that go with fonts and stuff like that. And then we also have the 9 slice that is used when we're actually here, when we're actually standing up the button, and that's got its own resources that get uploaded to the GPU and so forth. And then we essentially, when we create the base, right? So when we go to here, SUI control base, what happens is it registers it internally with a series of arrays. And so we have an active array and an inactive array. And what this does is it basically moves pointers to controls from one list to the other, depending on its active state. The advantage there being that we can very quickly iterate through all of the active controls and ignore the inactive controls, which has been great, and I don't plan on changing that. However, having the pointer here means that we can have a control that gets essentially destroyed, or a system that gets destroyed without telling the standard UI system, hey, this thing's been destroyed, which is not really ideal, I think. And so the way that a lot of our other systems work is the system is what actually owns the thing, and you are handed a handle to that thing, to whatever it references it. And I really think that is the way to go. We've rewritten a lot of our systems to work that way. And I think that this system should be no different. So at some point, instead of actually saving off a bunch of SUI control structs like this, that contain all this stuff, right? Which just basically makes, the size of this structure absolutely huge. instead of storing all of this data here, all of this, we really should be storing handles to it, right? And this is really the last system I think that works this way. And so that's definitely something I wish I had done differently. And I am going to have to refactor that before we get too deep into this. And it shouldn't be too terrible, but I don't necessarily want to do that on camera. So, Olex the dev, lurking mode engaged, fair enough. All right. That is, ownership mentioned. Yeah, yes. Ownership mentioned, yes, but we don't talk about around here. The R language. We don't no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I think we need to make a change there. Okay. So with all of that said, what I actually want to look into is this function down here, which is tree refresh. And obviously we had some to-dos in here and all that stuff, and that's fine. So essentially what we do is, let's see, we do a get hierarchy. We loop through each of the nodes within the top level of that hierarchy, and then we quit. So this right here is where we're creating that label. And then we add sort of the hierarchy node context to that label, so we know we've clicked, etc. And so I think rather than continuing to build out the system on this SUI label, I think now is the time to actually kind of create that new control. So I'm going to go in here to Kohi, and we're going to go into the UI standard library under controls, and I'm going to create, let's see, I could actually, and maybe I should, create a tree for this, right? A tree and then tree items. I think I'm going to create the tree item first, then wrap it in a tree later, just to make sure that I've got everything created the way I want it to. So I'm going to add, we're going to call this SUI tree item .h and C. And let's go here. We'll do pragma once. And let's see. Actually, I think I'm probably going to... I think I might copy pasta the header for label. At least some of it. So let's actually just grab all of this. Okay, so what we have here is the internal data, right? So this is obviously not label. This is going to be tree item internal data, and then we have tree item internal data there. So we have size, color, binding instance ID, we're going to need that. Font type, we're going to need that. Bitmap font, system font. Actually, we probably don't need to hold on to those, because we can just pass those through to an SUI control, and then we're going to do label. And then we have vertex buffer offset. So, okay, so I don't think our base control is actually going to need any of these things. So that's all for geometry generation. We don't need that there. And I'm going to get rid of that, right? So we're going to have two things here. Actually, three things. We're going to have SUI control label. We're going to have, what do I want to call this? Toggle button, I guess. And really that should be the first thing that we add. And then we're going to have the SUI control, and we'll do child. How do we want to do this? Child bounds. container. Yeah, child container. And then the last thing that we're going to have is, and I think a D array is probably the thing to use here. We're going to have a struct SUI tree item in, wait a minute. We don't want to do that. It's got to be a struct of SUI controls. An array of struct SUI controls, rather. And we're going to do children. See, and this is one of those places where handles would be a lot cleaner. So this is why I'm thinking like handles are going to be the way to go. But we're going to set this up as a D array. So that's easily modified. And we are going to have, let's see, updates. I don't know that we actually need anything. I don't know that we need an update. I'll keep it anyways, I guess. Render, create, destroy. So we need those. This is going to be a, let's do a tree item text set. In fact, actually, let's do SUI label. And we're going to do a SUI tree item underscore globally. There we go. All right. We're going to do away with the color setting because I don't think we're going to need or want that. The ability to get and set the text is going to be important. Line height's not really a thing I care about. Measure string's not really a thing I care about either. Yeah, I think that should be good enough, right, to get started with. This is kind of what I'm thinking that the ye old interface is going to basically look like. So we're going to create a the tree item itself is basically going to be just a container, and that container is going to have bounds that include it's going to include the toggle button and label by default. And then childed to that, it's going to have I wonder if it should be a child of this, actually. Or if the tree should manage that. So like when we have a tree view like this, right, and you expand, in this case it's folders, right? But this is essentially what we're going to have this for, entities, essentially. When you expand that, you sort of have this whole section, which in this case is 3 lines, right? We have 3 sub-items of this guy. And so, like, I think we should have the containment of that be managed by the control itself, not the tree. I think that makes the most sense. Yeah, okay. So this is what's going to contain those sort of child items, right? And then this will either be hidden or... it'll either be hidden or shown. And then depending on how many items we have in there, we will basically take into account the bounds of the entire thing. And the bounds of that entire object will be used to sort of redirect the flow of the entire tree. Penguin operator, good to see you. Hello. Okay, so I guess let's actually just grab this and go to tree item, and we're going to include SUI tree item, and I'm just going to those two are going to be super easy. Get rid of that. We'll take care of destroy in a second. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do SUI base control create, right? That's going to set up all of our base state and stuff that we need. And that's just going to pass through all of this stuff. So we say if that fails, then frankly, in this case, we just return false. I don't know why that would fail, but here we are. Okay, so with that, we have a couple of things that we need. Let's see. So we need to create our label and we need to create our button. So the label, let's do a SUI label control create pass through states. The name we're actually gonna have to build. All right, so we'll do a label name equals string format. We'll do a just the name of the standard name of the sort of parent control, and then we'll do label. And so we'll just do name like that. We'll pass through label name. Not forget to clean that up. String free, label name. Font type will just pass through. Font name will pass through. Font size will pass through. The text will also pass through. And then the control is going to be the address of, oh, we don't have our internal data yet. So we need SUI tree item internal data, typed data is equal to k allocates. And this is another thing I want to fix because I'm not a huge fan of the way that these controls all have to allocate their stuff. Not a huge fan of that. It's not been really a performance penalty per se, but I just don't like it. So we're going to go size of SUI tree item internal data, and the memory tag is going to be memory tag UI. And so we want here the address of typed data, and then toggle button. Oh wait, no, not toggle button, label. And if this fails for some reason, then we'll just return false for now. And maybe we'll delete about it. Failed to create label for tree item. I don't know why that would ever fail. I might take the failure code out of there, quite honestly, but maybe it'll fail to upload to the GPU or something. I'm not sure. But either way, let's see, that's not going to get cleaned up though if we do that. So time for our good friend, labels. So we'll do tree item create cleanup. And we'll do this. We'll have a B8 success equals false. And then right before the label, we'll do B8 or success rather equals true. And then we'll return success, right? So if we hit this, then we're going to go to tree item create cleanup. That way we don't have to worry about this getting cleaned up no matter what we do. All right, so that's the label. The only other thing that we have to do is we have to say SUI, what is it? SUI control add child, I think. Is that not it? Oh, I should probably rename that. That's kind of a crappy name, but okay. All right, so that's going to take state, and then I think it takes the parent and then the child. Okay, so the parent is going to be the control we're building, so out control, and then the child is going to be the address of typed data label. All right, so we add that. And then I guess we could probably also set its transform. So we could do k transform position set. The transform is going to be typed data label. K transform. And the position is going to be vec3. In fact, actually, let's just do it this way. Vec3. And we'll use, I guess I'll just offset it by like something like that, right? Oh, that's going to be the label though. Label's going to have to be offset by more than that. It's going to have to be offset by, let's say, I don't know, 15. Whoops. 15. 16. Nice round number. Okay, so that's the label. And then we also need a button. Oh. How do we want to do this? We also want to set one more property. Type data label. Mouse can interact to false. For now. We don't want the mouse picking up the click event. For now. We are eventually going to want that for like double clicks, but for now we don't want that. So the next thing we're going to want is we're going to want a, let's do a, what do we want to call this? Toggle box or toggle button name equals string format toggle button. So we have to do a if not SUI button control create with text. So obviously state, and then name is just going to be, whoops, toggle button name. We're going to pass through and use the same font data. The text content for this, the default of them is going to be non-collapsed. So we're going to want to use that. The default is going to be collapsed, right? So if it's pointing down, that means it's open. If it's pointing to the right, that means it can be opened. And then we want the address of typed data toggle button. Right, so if that fails, then we can bleat about it and go to failed to create toggle button for the tree item. And then here we have toggle button name. Okay, so we don't leak that. And we actually want to do these two things for this guy. This just needs to be toggle button. And then this needs to be toggle button. And then this I actually want to switch back to 2. And then I want to do k transform. No, not k transform. SUI button width set states SUI control. It's the address of typed data toggle button. And then the width we want to set for this is probably going to be, let's see, we padded in by 2. We want at least 2 pixels of padding between it and the label probably. So let's just call that a good 12 pixels. I forget, does that one integer? Yeah, it does. Okay. So we'll call that 12 pixels. We might have to change that up a little bit, but and then let's also do SUI button control height set. I don't know that I'm going to need both of these, but that's why I'm putting them in separate. toggle button. And then the height I also want to be 12, just for consistency purposes. Okay, I don't know that that's going to be right, but for now, at least, I think that's going to be good. And these are already added as children, so I think all we need to do is add it to the render list, which I don't, frankly, remember exactly how to do. Let me go to the label. I think all we have to do is call. Let me grab this. Let's destroy render. Oh, this has all kinds of font stuff in it. I don't actually need all of that. All I need to do is this, I guess. I do need to do that. In fact, I should probably do that first. And then it's this renderable bit that I think I have to create. Actually, do I even need to do that, though, is the question. I might not, actually. Let's see. Chat, I apologize. Going to post a wall of text. Fair enough. Let me see. I'm actually going to scroll up a little bit further. Custom engine, is it from scratch or do you use the graphics, libraries, etc.? Everything's from scratch. All written in C. Getting sidetracked is always fun, yes. Won't distract you from what you're doing, but I was taking a quick look at your reworked shaders. One thing that stands out is the number of vertex outputs you are using in the standard shader variants. Whether there are too many or not needs to be validated in a GPU profiler. Want to look specifically at ISBE and fill rate. If you have noticeable time spent in ISBE, capped fill rate. If you're bottlenecking on that, which I'm pretty sure, fairly sure you are. I probably am. Yeah, I've not really done too much in terms of optimization, to be completely honest. Always interpolating the vertex results, even for things that don't need to be interpolated, like constant units. Yeah, I'm doing that in a lot of places instead of using flats, for sure. Yeah, those are all really good points, for sure. But yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely need to do some work around that. It's just like been one of those things where it hasn't been enough to make me do it yet. As bad as that sounds. It just hasn't been prioritized, I guess, because it's not really been as much of an issue. Is OpenGL C still a choice for a 3D survival FPS? If I focus strictly on game code for now, I want to avoid over-engineering a generic engine up front, refactoring, modularizing incrementally as I go. I'm avoiding Vulkan because as a beginner, I'd spend more time on synchronization than actually rendering things. Is this game first path same with GL today? Yes, it is. Just build only what you need, as Oleg says. That's what we're doing here. We're only building what we need. Like up until now, for example, for the UI, I've had a label control, a panel control, and a button. That's it. And a text box, right? And I just built those things as I needed. Now I need more controls, so I'm building them. Same concept. Yeah. So Psycode, I was aware of some of it. You've given me a couple of things I do need to check on, but yeah, I am aware of those issues for sure. It's been one of those things I just haven't had the time to get to it, frankly. I haven't had the time to prioritize it, I should say. Let's see. Oh, I think you asked the same question on both sides. Okay. But yeah, I hope that all makes sense to you. Okay. Actually, do I even need... So... Let me look at something real quick. So I don't really have anything. I think this is literally all I have to do. Is just this. Is literally just call render on like the children controls. I kind of wonder if I even need to do that, to be completely honest. I kind of don't think I do. So I'm actually going to put this here as like a comment, but I don't think I actually need to do that. Let's just do a return true for now. And I'm going to comment this out too so it doesn't bleat at me. Updates, I don't think I have anything as far as update goes, so I'm just going to turn true on that. And then destroy, obviously I need to do some stuff there. Self. And then to do the thing. All right, this is important though. So tree item text set. In this case, we want to just do, actually I need that internal state. And I'll do SUI label text set state. The control is going to be the address of typed data label, and then we'll just pass through text. Oops. I am a dingus. I keep hitting the wrong dang keys tonight. All right, so the other thing we're going to do is the ability to get it, which is actually pretty straightforward as well. So we just return that and then get rid of text. Cool. Now comes the interesting part. So when we create one of these, there is actually something in the sort of base control that we have. There is something in the, wait, where is it? Here. In the base control that we have the ability to assign user data to it, right? I think that I actually want to avoid using that because then I can use that for something else. Since I'm kind of creating a custom tree control, which kind of is expected to have its own sort of context with something anyway, I think it kind of makes sense for us to add sort of a second context here of something that it can hold on to that is a little bit above that, right? Because I have a feeling that we're going to need that base layer context for something else. So when we go ahead and we create this, in fact, let me actually space these down because that is way too long and it's kind of annoying. Right, so when we get here, we're going to do a, we're going to say void context. Do we do context size? I think what we're going to do is we're going to make the assumption that whatever, how do I want to do this actually? Because we could have free-form data, right? Or we could take like a U64, which could also be a pointer. That's actually a little bit better, right? Because if we pass a pointer to something, we could also cast that as needed. So let's do U64 context for that. Because then that allows us to store a lot of different things. So we'll do U64, context. And that context will be part of the internal state here. So we're just going to say U64 context. That could be whatever, right? And then we'll also have the ability to set and retrieve that. So KAPI U64 SUI tree item context get. And then that's just going to be this. And then we're obviously going to want a set for that as well. U64 context. And then void. Void. Right? And so basically it kind of becomes like this own like little property bag. Not really a property bag, I guess. We should probably make a property bag. That might actually be something that would be super useful. But for now, let's continue being useless and just use a U64 instead. So we're just going to return typed data context. And then here, we're going to do get rid of the return and just say equals context. And so, for example, one thing we might use there is we might pass the entity as the context, right? And so when we click on it, we've got some sort of a context there for what we've actually clicked. Okay. So trying to think if there's anything else we have to do or if we can just use this as is. I think this is pretty much going to be it. So if we go to editor, we should now be able to replace this with that, right? So we have, let's see, label, tree elements. Okay, so we're not going to do label anymore, or at least we're not going to call it that. We're going to call it, tree item, right? And we're going to do SUI tree item control create, okay? And so I think that takes most the same properties as the label except for the context. So the context is going to be the node entity, right? And then we can still add that as a child. And then let's actually just see what this looks like. Let's see if I got the button layout and stuff correct. Wait a minute. What did I... Oh, I screwed up something with the go-tos, didn't I? I'll bet I did. I think I know what it is, too. These have to be declared before the first go-to. Otherwise, it doesn't know, like, if it gets here and it hasn't hit this yet and it skips it, it's not going to know what the heck is going on. So, this one's fine, but I think I'm going to take it anyways and move it. So let's go ahead and just put that up here. Let's call this, let's do k-null there. And we'll do the same thing here. K-null. If I can spell it right. And that should solve that problem. Yep. Okay. Actually still have the editor running up here, so let me kill that. And I'm actually going to turn off these breakpoints. All right, so let's run. Switch to tree view. All right, not perfect, right? But we can actually see that our new controls are here because we can actually see the text rendering. Those buttons are nowhere near big enough, right? So we're really gonna have to work on our spacing there. I keep I keep forgetting that I'm working on a 4K display, so like everything's a lot smaller than I think it would be. But I'm thinking we're gonna have to go probably 30 by 30 on that. So again, this is probably something that should be configurable. But for now, this is what we're going to do. So that position can stay. This one, however, needs to be like 32. Actually, I'm not even sure 30 is going to be enough because I think the font size is 32. Now that I think about it. Yeah. Let's go with probably 40, although it doesn't look like those symbols are centering vertically for some reason. What happens if I resize? Nope, not really. Okay. All right, so let's go 40. All right, getting better. I need to space them out a little bit more now, but that is better. So let's see, the buttons are 40, so we probably need to be at least, I would say each line should probably be at the 50 increment. That'd give us a couple pixels of padding on each side. Let me see. I want to take the... I think I actually want to bump this to -2 for the label position. And then in the editor, yeah, we're using 35 as the line height right now, which is, I know, hard-coded numbers. It's poop. Let's go const 32 item height. And we're going to say that's equal to 50 seems a little extreme. Let's do 45. I don't know that that's going to be quite enough, but item height. Let's see. Oh. This position, it was based off of labels, though. So I think we can actually get rid of this negative padding here. I say that, it's probably going to look like crap now. Well, that's not too bad, actually. I can live with that. Okay, so these are basically going to, when we click on these, which they don't do anything at the moment, but when we go to click on these, what they should do, I don't know why they're not clickable. We may have like a layering issue here. Unless it's the bounds for the entire thing. Yeah, we may have to debug that to figure that out. Also, I noticed the selection isn't working anymore either, and that should be the entire control that does that. So, did we actually disable? Did we disable mouse interaction for the button? No, just the label. I don't think I have to set that to true for this. But let's do it anyway. Oh, also, so the bounds also have to be updated to encapsulate all of this stuff. So one thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to need to know what the width of the sort of parent owning tree is. And we should know that on creation, but we should also have the ability to update that whenever the parent tree is resized as well. So I think that's just going to be, I don't think we need to get that. I think we can literally just have a setter for that, and that'll be enough. So we'll say B8, or actually, this can just be void, honestly. SUI tree item control width set. Standard UI states struct SUI control self. If I could type the right dingus thing. And then for width, we want a U32. Honestly, I can be U16 width. All right, and we can go here. Okay, and so what we're going to want to do here is we're going to say self bounds width equals width. Pretty simple stuff, right? And then also, I forgot to add that to the create, right? So we have the context. Let's do that before everything else, I guess. Or let's see, maybe after the name. U16 initial width. Right. And then there, right? And so when we go to create the bounds, I guess we can do that right before success. So we'll do it's going to be out control bounds width equals initial width, and then out control bounds height is going to be equal to 40, right? Don't like hard-coded crap, but sometimes, sometimes while you are making the thing work, put another one in here. I mean, honestly, I probably will see it, but that'll set the bounds so that we have interactivity. So that should restore our click. Let's see. So initial width is going to be, what did I set the... What did I set that panel's width to? Oh, I think I could do... I think I have that, actually. We can do state tree inspector width. Whoops. Dang it. Width. And I'm actually going to subtract 10 from that. Just so that we've got a little bit of padding over on the right side. Okay. Let's run that. Yeah. So now I should be able to click on this, and I have my selection. Let me move the camera so you guys can see what I'm selecting. Yeah. So now we have our selection back. Perfect. Okay. And incidentally, this... Oh, that's... We probably ought to add... Oh, that's an interesting conundrum. So when I click on... The reason the button is not coming through, and this makes sense to me now. The reason the button's not coming through, or we're not getting the click, is because the entire control encapsulates the button. The click event is being consumed to select the object, which is what we want. However, I think instead of the click event being set to the parent, it probably should be clicked or set to the label. And then we have a separate event for these buttons. Because otherwise, we need the ability to click this button, and I don't necessarily want to change my selection. Like if I have this guy selected, right, which we need some way to represent that too. But I want to expand the list below this one without changing my selection. I need to be able to do that. So I think the click event actually needs to be, it needs to go to the underlying label, not the outer control. RNY served, how you doing? Welcome. I have been well, thank you. Appreciate you asking. Let's see. Been working on Unicode parsing library for my TUI. You know, handmade and all that. Generating lookup tables for character widths and grapheme breaks is such a pain in the behind. Yes. Why did I choose to do this? Yeah. I've gone about as far with UTF parsing or Unicode parsing as I want to go in this engine. The only thing I have left to figure out is like, yeah, Arabic. Right to left, but also the little connecting things. I forget what they're called. Maybe that's what you're talking about, but yeah. I don't know how crazy I'm going to go with it though. Or maybe for that I'll just use a bitmap font. I don't know. All right. Gotta go see you tomorrow. All right. Have a good one. Okay, so the onClick is the tree label clicked, which does this. I feel like this is actually a scenario where we actually kind of want to provide a different sort of callback, right? So up till now, we've had just a callback, like when you click the thing, that's it. You just click it and you're done. You don't have any sort of ways to customize that per se. Whereas here we have two different situations, right? So when we control, or when we click the label, we want something different to happen than when we click the button. But when we click the button, that's not something we really need to expose to the outer bit of logic. So I'm wondering if I should just hijack the onClick. And maybe have it go through to its children. Let me try something. Because I think I might be able to actually do this without too much hackery. What I need is essentially this. Let's go to the bottom here. Oops, wrong file. Wrong file, you dongus. Okay. So go to the bottom here, and we're going to say I guess unclicked. Sure, fine. We'll take this, run to the top. right? And then we can actually specify a different internal unclicked for this, I think. So I think what we can do is, when we set this up, let's do out control internal click equals on click, unclicked. And then have this guy. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. True if the event should be allowed to propagate to other controls, otherwise false. Okay. So let's return true here and see if that allows it. That might be enough. No. Okay. Oh, because that doesn't execute the user one, which the other one did before. All right, let me think about this. So why is that not? That should allow the button click to work, though. So if self on click, self on click, call that. And then that should be state self event. Make sure the user on click gets called. Okay, our selection's back. But our clicks still aren't going through to that child for some reason. Okay. So I need a way to basically say, well, okay, let me do this first. Let me make sure that what I'm thinking is actually happening, right? So we'll do a kdebug toggle button clicked, right? Just so that we can actually see what's happening. And then when we set up the button, wait. It's because I had the wrong thing in here. This should be toggle button. Right? And then toggle button on click equals toggle unclicked, which I still needed anyways. Right, and then if toggle on click should probably return false. So the event doesn't propagate. All right, oh, I need to restart that. If I'd thought about it, I would have made the UI hot reloadable, but no, that just still didn't work. Why? that definitely should have worked. Okay, so we have... maybe I am going to have to do it that way. I might have to actually pass the event through. That would suck. I really don't want to do it that way. Because then I have to detect like what was actually clicked. And that's really annoying. So we can do outer control clicked. I wonder if I should set up the bounds for this or if I should just not bother. It is surprising to me though that the button isn't being checked first. Maybe if I do, maybe if I shut this off. I haven't really exercised sort of nested clicks yet, so I'm not surprised I've got a couple things to work out in here. Okay, that broke selection, which I'm not surprised about, but it did also seem to break the button click. Why is the button click broken? The hover works. And I don't think it's the text within the button that's blocking it, because otherwise those wouldn't work. And they very obviously do. All right, let me try setting the bounds of that to like 4. Because that should technically allow me to like click underneath of it if this is actually the issue. And it still doesn't work. Okay. That's interesting. So, it's not that. Can mouse interact? False. Okay, I'll get rid of that. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that might need to be the combination of those two things. I don't think so, but... You dingus. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Nope. Okay, so what I'm actually thinking now... I know of a hacky way to do it, I just don't know if I want to do it that way. You dingus. I'm thinking if I offset the button's transform outside the bounds, then maybe that would work. Right, so like maybe I do... I don't know, -50 or something. Something really off the wall. Yeah, see, I can click it now. I suppose that is one way I could do it, though. I could just have the control be over here and just have this kind of do its own thing, and maybe its context is its own in control. Maybe I can just set it up that way. Okay, so to do that, I would need... So let's actually go, let me think. So we'll go negative 42 on this, and then we'll zero this guy out. Right, and then in the editor, we will set these. Let's see. So each one of those would need to be, let's see, 10. So negative, no, 32 more. So it would need to be 42 plus 10, 52 to account for the negative space. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Is it the freaking panel that's blocking it? Because that should have worked. Let's change this to like 32. Oops. It's the panel that's blocking it. Why is the panel blocking it? Why would the panel block it on this set of controls and not this one? Did I miss something? All right, let's look at the properties of the main panel. Let's see. So here's the main panel. So that doesn't have anything special to write home about. Scene inspector. Entity inspector. Ah, okay. Apparently I did not. Oh no, those are fine. Add child. And then the label. I mean, other than just this not being active right away, which I think also the scene panel and the entity panel are the same way. Yeah, they are. They start off false and invisible. False and invisible. False and invisible. The main panel is always visible. That's the only difference. That's the only difference between them. But I think the other panels worked fine, didn't they? It's got to be something with the custom control, I think. Yeah, because I can select these just fine. If I go to entity and select one, I can select those just fine. But this one I can only select if it's like off to the edge. That is a good one. I don't quite understand why that's happening. But I think that's probably where I'm going to have to put a pin in it for tonight. Can't click portion of button that is in or overlapping owning panel. Let's see. I'm gelling. Good to see you as well. You know, after being a programmer for some 20 odd years, you would think I wouldn't make it dingus programming mistakes like doing greater than when I mean less than. I do that all the time. Thank you guys for the follows, by the way. I know that's late. Reminds me of a guy in college that used to call less than inverted greater than. Psycho, that's just painful. Did he do it just to trigger people? Must have. Yeah, it is pretty horrible. That's like having a that's like doing something like this in code. If not is not disabled. It's kind of like that. I'm sure everybody's seen that kind of stuff before. That's one of my favorite examples. Anyway. All right. So that's probably going to do it for tonight. We're going to continue on this tomorrow. I'm going to be able to do a lot more work tomorrow because I won't have to like talk about all the stuff I did offline tomorrow. So that's going to be good. Let me find somebody to raid over on the Twitch side. Let me do a quick search here to see who is on even. See, similar category. Let's see if we can find somebody new tonight, actually, maybe. Maybe not. We'll see. Anybody doing things similar to what we're doing? Maybe. Maybe kind of, sort of, but not. While I'm searching, by the way, if you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate a follow on the Twitch side and or the YouTube side, or both if you're so inclined. Those things help me out a lot. I'm trying to grow the channel still. And so each and every one of those follows does me a great deal of good, and I really appreciate them. Not much going on tonight in the way of actual, like, coding, it seems. Okay. I actually see one person that I think I'm going to raid, but let me just... Okay. This person's got 10 viewers. Let's go and see what they're doing. I think I've raided him before, but let's go ahead and raid Step Henny 0. See what they're up to. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. It's great hanging out with you guys. We got a lot of stuff done tonight, which is good. I'm probably going to push this up to the repo now, just so that I don't lose it. But yeah, that's going to do it for me tonight. I will catch you guys in the next stream tomorrow night. So see you guys later. Have a good one.